Welcome back to Mad Hatter's Civil War History. For today's episode, I wanted to start out with a bit of a disclaimer. This program explores a historical counterfactual. The events discussed did not occur as presented. This analysis does not propose a different outcome for the Battle of Gettysburg, but examines how documented leadership styles might have influenced decisions during the opening hours of July 1st, 1863. On the morning of July 1st, 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg was shaped by who was not there as much as by who was. Within the opening hours, two of the Civil War's most influential battlefield commanders were absent. One already dead, the other killed almost as soon as the fighting began. Their absence did not change armies or objectives, but it changed decisions. It altered timing, tempo, and the way opportunities were either seized or allowed to pass. Stonewall Jackson had been gone for barely 2 months. John Reynolds would fall within minutes of arriving on the field. Both men had built reputations not on clever plans drawn at headquarters, but on decisive action under pressure. This video does not ask who would have won the Battle of Gettysburg if they had been present. Instead, it asks a narrower and more useful question. How would their leadership styles, proven on earlier battles, have influenced the opening day of the battle? By examining how Jackson and Reynolds commanded before Gettysburg, and by placing those behaviors back into the known constraints of July 1st, this is a study of leadership, not speculation, not destiny, but decision-making, and not a different war, but a finer understanding of why Gettysburg unfolded the way it did. On July 1st, 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg was shaped less by grand strategy than by absence. Two of the most consequential battlefield commanders of the Civil War, Thomas Stonewall Jackson and John Fulton Reynolds, were missing at the very moment their leadership might have mattered the most. One had been dead for 2 months. The other would be dead within minutes of arriving. What follows is not a story of alternate victory or defeat. It is a study in command presence. How might the opening day of Gettysburg have unfolded if Stonewall Jackson and John Reynolds had both been present, exercising the leadership styles they had demonstrated repeatedly throughout the war? By the summer of 1863, both armies were operating under new leadership structures shaped by recent trauma. For the Confederacy, Jackson's death at Chancellorsville had removed the Army of Northern Virginia's most aggressive and independent field commander. His replacement, Richard Ewell, was competent, brave, and experienced, but temperamentally different. Ewell hesitated where Jackson surged. He awaited clarification where Jackson acted on instinct. For the Union, John Reynolds was arguably the Army of the Potomac's most trusted corps commander. Lincoln had considered him for the Army command. Meade relied on him implicitly. On the morning of July 1st, Reynolds was not just a corps commander, he was Meade's forward decision-maker. Both absences mattered, but they mattered most during the first few hours of Gettysburg, when terrain, time, and leadership collided. Thomas Jackson's reputation rests not on blind audacity, but on a specific operational pattern. He moved fast. He struck early. He created dilemmas rather than responded to them. At Second Manassas, Jackson seized ground before the enemy understood its importance. In the Shenandoah Valley, he repeatedly forced Union commanders into reactive postures. At Chancellorsville, he acted with incomplete intelligence, not recklessly, but decisively, because he believed hesitation was itself the greater risk. Above all, Jackson acted without waiting for perfect clarity. At Gettysburg, the Confederate right on July 1st stalled after pushing Union forces through the town, Cemetery Hill, and Culp's Hill lay before them, undefended for hours. Lee issued discretionary orders. Ewell hesitated. Jackson would not have. This does not mean that Jackson automatically succeeds. It means he almost certainly presses the issue. He probes, he commits, he forces the Union to respond under pressure rather than regroup at leisure. The question is not whether Jackson takes the high ground, but whether his aggression changes when and how the Union secures it. Wars are often remembered for their great battles, but behind every army on campaign lay a quieter struggle, fought far from the main line, the constant search for food, ammunition, and survival itself. In Forage Ahead, players step into that overlooked world. In Forage Ahead, players lead soldiers across a continent torn apart by war. Each miniature represents a unique individual, trained in different skills and forced to rely on one another in uncertain conditions. You guide them as they move through forests, fields, and contested grounds, searching for food, weapons, and vital supplies that could determine whether an army advances or starves. Forage Ahead is not simply a game of combat. It is a game of judgment, restraint, and adaptation, where terrain matters, timing matters, and survival depends on what you can secure and bring back. Because wars are not won by battles alone. They are sustained, quietly, dangerously, by those who forage ahead. Scan the QR code to order now. Mad Hatter subscribers can get 40% off the purchase. John Reynolds is often described as cautious, but that misreads his record. Reynolds was willing to sacrifice forces early to preserve operational advantage later. At 2nd Manassas, he led a brutal rearguard action that brought the Union Army time to escape destruction. At Gettysburg, his first instinct upon arriving was not retreat, but commitment. He chose to fight forward, accepting that the First Corps might pay the price in order to secure the ground south of town. Reynolds understood two things: terrain mattered and time mattered more. His leadership style emphasized decisiveness without theatrical aggression. He deployed quickly. He trusted his subordinates. He reorganized what had to be held, even if it could not be held cheaply. Reynolds' death removed that clarity at the very moment it was needed. Imagine the morning of July 1st with both men alive and active. Confederate forces drive the Union 1st and 11th Corps back through Gettysburg. The Union line bends but does not break. On the heights beyond town, time stretches dangerously. Jackson pushes. Rather than halting to reorganize or await explicit instructions, Jackson orders divisions forward towards Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. He probes for weaknesses. He pressures the Union withdrawal. Artillery is brought up aggressively. Infantry advances are coordinated under a single guiding intent: seize the ground now, not later. Meanwhile, Reynolds, still alive, recognizes the threat almost immediately. He understands Jackson's pattern. Reynolds does not attempt to hold the collapsing forward line longer than necessary. Instead, he accelerates the withdrawal, redirecting forces earlier towards Cemetery Hill. 11th Corps, instead of unraveling in confusion, is repositioned with clearer purpose. The defense tightens faster. This is no longer a staggered retreat. It becomes a race. What changes most in this scenario is not outcome, it is tempo. With Jackson present, Confederate decision-making compresses. With Reynolds alive, Union reaction time shortens. The battlefield becomes denser with intent. Orders are clearer. Hesitation decreases on both sides. The fog of war remains, but it thickens faster under pressure rather than after pause. Under such conditions, several things are likely to happen. First, the Union occupied Cemetery Hill earlier, but under heavier pressure. Then, Confederate probes are more aggressive, but less coordinated in the terrain immediately south of town. As a result, casualties were likely to increase on July 1st, not because of poor leadership, but because decisive leadership compresses contact. Neither side enjoys the luxury of delay that history afforded them. What likely does not change, this is where responsible analysis matters. Even with Jackson and Reynolds both present, several foundational realities remain. The Union still possesses interior lines and shorter reinforcement routes. Meade still has multiple corps converging, and Lee still faces logistical constraints and numbers he cannot replace. A more decisive Confederate push on July 1st does not guarantee a breakthrough. A stronger Union defense does not guarantee a flawless stand. What likely changes is not who wins Gettysburg, but how evenly the opening day is contested and how quickly both armies commit to the ground. This scenario illustrates a central truth about command. Great leaders rarely alter the strategical fundamentals of a campaign. What they do alter is friction. They reduce it for their own side. They hopefully increase it for the enemy. Jackson applied pressure before uncertainty could harden into resistance. Reynolds imposed order before chaos could metastasize. Had they faced one another at Gettysburg, their collision could not have produced a clean victory for either man. It would have produced a sharper, faster, bloodier July 1st, one in which decisions carried immediate cost. Gettysburg, as it unfolded, was shaped by absence, by the empty spaces where decisive leadership might have narrowed margins or accelerated outcomes. Stonewall Jackson's death left Confederate actions hesitant at the very moment aggression was needed. John Reynolds' death left the Union temporarily leadership at the very moment clarity was essential. Had both men been present, Gettysburg would not have become a different battle, but it would have become a tighter one, with less drift, less pause, and less room for error. In war, leadership rarely changes destiny, but it always changes the experience of battle. At Gettysburg, that difference was written into the silence left behind by two missing voices. Thanks for watching this episode of Mad Hatter's Civil War History. Like, follow, and click the bell for notifications to ensure you see all of the latest content. As always, let me know if there's any other important events of the American Civil War you would like me to address.